we're just going to draw a ball, kind of a round circle, right? And when I'm holding my pencil, I'm also not holding it. We talked a little bit about this last time. If you hold it like you're writing a sentence, right? Like you're trying to do math or write a sentence like this, you're already kind of tensing up your hand to grip the pencil in that kind of appropriate penmanship way, right? So to draw more lightly and loosely, hold your pencil between your forefingers and your thumb and turn your hand over. This way your hand you're not using as much muscle there, you're not straining it, and you can just draw really lightly and more loosely. So start with this ball shape, right? This is just a sphere. We've drawn these kind of shapes before when we were doing our value worksheets. Okay. I'm going to grab one of those green pencils. Right, this one is a 6B, so that's going to be a little bit darker. You guys will be able to see it a little better too. So we draw that really loose kind of sphere shape. Then let's just kind of set a light source here. Real loose, right? Let's say the light source is coming in from this upper right-hand side. So our shadow is going to be on what side? If the light's on the upper right, bottom left. Good. So go ahead and do some of these kind of values where you're just shading it in. So we're already kind of adding in this value. I'm just going to kind of smudge it out here. So this is the darker side of the eyeball. Light source is kind of coming in from the top right there. So I've shaded it in, already kind of giving myself some value here. Okay, you can use your blending tools, right? You guys all have access to these. They're inside that bin over there. So you can use this to push the graphite around too. That'll make it easier for you to erase in the long run. Right? So there's the beginning. Now let's think about this as a sphere. So I'm going to actually draw in what we call like construction lines of this ball here. So just so you can get an idea that this is round, you don't have to do this here, but I'm just going to show you that, you'll do it in blue, that this is a round object. This would be the front side of the eyeball. Okay, these kind of, think about this as like longitude and latitude lines, right, that are wrapping around a globe. So this is like literally curving around this eyeball. So this would be the front side of the eyeball. So the eyelid, let's say we're going to put it right over here, kind of down in this, not the eyelid, the tear duct, right? We're going to start drawing the eyelid over this area. And what I want to do first is think about the eyelid, rather than, we talked about that shape being really flat if we're just drawing a football shape. We're going to give it a little bit more true to life kind of curves here. So there is an element of some eyelids that have like a flatness to one side and then it slightly curves around. So there's this kind of upward slant. Think about the angles we could draw, right? So the upward slant. And then this curve around this side, so there's a straight and a curve. And then kind of mimic that same straight over here on the bottom right, and then curve it up to this area here. So you've got this straight going into a curve, and then this kind of goes a little bit straight down this way and then curves over towards the tear duct. So that's kind of wrapping the eyelid around this ball that's behind it. So that's the eyeball. All right, now if you look around, you can kind of see too that the eyelid is just still covering the eyeball. So this would be that kind of crease up here at the top of that sphere where your eyelid kind of dips back into your eye socket. So you can darken in the top of that ball right up there. And you can also darken in the bottom of it to be the bottom eyelid. All right, so we've just kind of constructed this eyeball to be a little bit more round, basing it on that sphere we drew inside there. Okay. Now, if you think back to that video, there were some great things that he talked about as far as the eyelid itself, right? So he had some shadows on the eyelid and some highlights. So if you have an eraser, pull out a highlight on the eyelid up here, but also have the opposite side of the eyelid. As it curves around, it gradually gets darker over here towards the left. That's important too. Okay. So wrapping it around this ball. Now, there are some lines because we're drawing loose that we can erase. We'll go back in and clean all those up later on. Right now we're going to insert the iris and pupil. So make it as round as you possibly can. I'm going to make it right over in this area here like it's kind of looking over in this direction. So I'm doing another circle. All right, if you want to hold your pencil like this again to draw that circle out, you can. And I'm not making it very large here. It does fit inside those two lines, right? So that would be like this eye is really open. Like it might be scared or excited or like opening its eyelids pretty far. All right? Then inside that, we can go ahead and add the pupil, which is a smaller circle. And then before we do anything else, what I want to do is add in a highlight. Because our light source is coming in from this upper right, I'm going to add this highlight in kind of over the iris, almost into the white part of the eye, which is also going to help us establish that glossiness to the eyeball, because the white of our eye at this point isn't totally white. There is a bit of some value on the white part of the eye. But if we leave that highlight right there and erase it back to the pure white, then we got some really nice bright areas there. And then also over the eye, the pupil, I'm going to add another little circular highlight here. So we almost have two little specks of light happening. All right, just to establish that part of the eye there as the darkest part, go ahead and shade in around that little speck of light. So you leave some white showing, that little dot there, inside the pupil. Right, that's going to be the darkest part of the eye. Try to make it as round as you possibly can. It should be circular. Okay. All right, from here, what we want to do is establish the eyelashes, but know that this is, where the eyelid meets the eyeball, and there is a part of the eyelid that is the skin part that just is right underneath that. So I'm going to go back in and erase out a little bit. Then I can go in there and draw in a little line just past that part of the eyeball. And that's where these lower eyelashes are going to grow out of. Again, so it's that little channel there that you create between the eyeball and the eyelashes. Now the upper eyelash is going to just kind of come right out of this area here. Unless you were looking underneath, you might not see that as much. So we're looking at this eyeball. It's three-dimensional. The eyelashes are going to be growing out to the right and then kind of up a little bit. And they don't have to be perfect. They can be a little bit wild. They don't have to be so straight and exact between each eyelash. The ones that are closest to the inside of the eye over here by the tear duct, those ones might just be going a little bit more off to the right. And as we get more towards the right, that's where we'll see more of the curve of that eyelash over this way. Okay, and then the eyelashes that are down here, these are going to go down and over towards that right area. They're very thin and kind of wispy over towards the inside of the eye, and as you get more towards the far right, then they'll get a little bit more thicker and defined. So you don't need to go crazy with those. They don't have to be super thick. You can make them as defined as you want. And they don't need to be extra long either. They could just be a little bit short like this. Okay. From here, we can start drawing in the iris. And I know Chris was talking earlier about how when you're drawing an eyeball, you really want to think about it as these lines, as far as the iris is concerned, these lines that are kind of coming out from the center of that eyeball. So, and I like to give them a bit of a curve too. So they're kind of almost these little curved lines happening from the inside of the eye outward. There'll be a little bit darker area like he was talking about in the video towards the inside and towards the outside. So this part is where you can get pretty detailed. Yesterday, I was working on that part for quite a while after I demonstrated it, just to add more detail. And some of the things I was doing was adding these little kind of loops as well, these little squiggles. You might even have little flecks of color in your eye. So if you wanted to look at your own eyeball in the mirror or take a picture of it with your camera phone, if you have one, you guys could do that to kind of study all the little details that happen just inside the iris of your eye. It can get pretty detailed, but leave a little bit of a lighter area on the bottom, and we're going to kind of go back over and shade in our eyeball with some darker values as well. So I'm going back in there, kind of adding in the detail. It's kind of stringy lines that exist inside that shape there. And the outer edge is usually a little bit darker. When we do this in our project, you're going to be able to choose the color of the eye. So you may choose a blue or a green. You might even do something a little bit surreal and do some, like strange colors, purples or oranges, something a little bit more far-fetched. You just keep adding those lines as you go. More and more detail. Maybe I'll do a little bit more just kind of value up here and blend it in. So that the top part of the iris looks a little bit darker just because of where it's at now. So as far as the values, I could push my values even more here. So I'm going to go back in towards the inside of the eye, kind of over in this area. Sorry about that. And drop in some more shadows on the white of the eye. Think about that Magritte that's up there. Notice how dark the white of the eye actually gets there as he's drawing, or painting, I should say. And then out here, this is still kind of the bottom of the eye away from the highlight. This area could get dark there as well. I'll use this little blending tool. Now this area with the highlight, inside the iris and pupil there and over the white of the eye, that's where we want to go back in there with our eraser to make sure that that's the brightest part, or the glossiest part of the eyeball. Just up here around underneath the eyebrow, I'm not going to draw the eyebrow here, but this would be in shadow as well. Remember, this is inside the eye socket, bless you. And then over here is inside the eye socket. So you could pop in some values there as well to do that. So a different approach, you might say, okay, I kind of get the idea of drawing a ball or that sphere first and then wrapping the eyelids around it. That's just one approach. This is there's a lot of different ways that you could go on about drawing the eyeball, but this, I think, helps to give you the three-dimensional illusion kind of a little bit more clearly by wrapping that eyelid around that ball. Notice, too, that this is round over here in the corner of the eye, because it's kind of looking away, so it's not quite to a point over here. And then we see the tear duct in this side. Here's the eyeball, so there might even be a little bit of a darker line, like right where that eyeball is over in this area. Because this is like where the eye is going into the eye socket over there. And then you could always go back in and darken right underneath the eyelash, since that's hanging over a bit. Now you're really stretching these values. You're pushing them farther and farther. That helps to make that eyeball look more three-dimensional, more realistic or round. Right? So in your drawing, you're going to have to decide how you want to incorporate the eyeball. You can have more than one as well. Maybe you want to involve lots of these eyeball shapes into your surrealist design. All right, but I kind of stopped this demo here. We'll kind of move on and talk more about the colored pencil drawing. You guys can keep adding to the iris right now if you haven't finished that, or the eyelashes, but I'm going to finish this